Hello, this is Mash It and Smash It, but you can call me Mash or Mash It for short. And let's talk about another Disney movie. Dumbo is the fourth animated film released by Walt Disney. And yeah, that's about it. There's no other major milestones worth bringing up. Actually, it is worth noting that this movie is based on a short story by Helen Aberson that was mostly made for a device in development called a roll-a-book, but otherwise it certainly wasn't anything well known compared to previous source materials. Though it is interesting how each Disney movie so far has been based on a different form of media. The first was based on a fairy tale, the second was based on a novel, the third was based on a bunch of musical compositions, and now we have one based on a little kid's book that very few to this day even know about despite this movie's existence. But I'm getting a little off topic. The movie focuses on a newborn circus elephant named Jumbo Jr., who's born with unusually large ears. This evokes a lot of laughter and mockery from both fellow elephants and humans alike, as he is given the nickname Dumbo. His mother, in trying to protect him from some mean kids, thus starting a giant scuffle with some circus attendants and the ringmaster himself, ends up getting locked in a cage, leaving Dumbo to deal with the cruelty and humiliation of the circus. But with the help of a mouse named Timothy, Dumbo soon discovers his ability to use his giant ears to fly. So yeah, this is a pretty simple story of overcoming one's unusual circumstances to find out why they're actually special and blah blah blah. The only real deviation this has from the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer story is that it throws a little mother and child separation into the mix. The animation is nice. Well, okay, it's really good, but no better than any of the other Disney films up to this point. Nothing truly groundbreaking. The world is also very simple and limited, though it does create a pretty harsh and almost sinister environment with the circus, from the workers and elephants putting up the tent in the rain, to the insane and borderline mean-spirited circus acts. It can get a little unpleasant at times, though after watching Pinocchio, all this feels like child's play to me. There's not a whole lot to say about the characters either. Dumbo's mostly just a cute animal sidekick who somehow found himself in a protagonist role. Although I suppose it's interesting to have a protagonist that doesn't talk. It must be pretty rare for animated movies, or even movies in general. Everything said, he is cute, if in a slightly in-your-face sort of way. Timothy is a fairly entertaining character, though he does come off as Diet Jiminy Cricket at times. And while he's meant to serve as the mouth of sorts for various scenes in this movie, sometimes the mouth gets a little too big, if you know what I mean. Though unlike Jiminy, this character does contribute quite a bit to the plot. Granted, some of his contributions only make things worse for Dumbo, but in the end, he more than makes up for it by helping the little pachyderm discover his flying capabilities. Still, not a character I will remember in the long run. Mrs. Jumbo is mostly the emotional support for the main character. If you're into the whole mother and child concept, whether you be a mother yourself or not, I suppose you'll empathize with her and or her baby, though there's not much to her character overall. In fact, aside from that musical number where either she or some omnipresent voiceover is singing, the only line she seems to have in the whole movie is at the beginning where she simply says her son's real name. But hey, the amount of love she shows for her son and going so far as to fight off those who are bullying him is admirable, so I have no real problems with her. Then we have the antagonists of the movie, or at least the closest we're gonna get to antagonists. Yeah, despite being credited as the movie's villain and even appearing as one in the computer game Disney's Villain's Revenge, the Ringmaster is pretty unofficial in his role. He's not really evil, despite all the mustachio twirls and being referred to as such in said game. He's greedy and arrogant, but hey, so is Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob SquarePants, and he never gets addressed as a villain no matter how much he deserves it. But as far as characters go, the Ringmaster is pretty blah. He's mostly just a less interesting version of Stromboli, Italian accent and all. Hell, even that kid who bullied Dumbo comes off as Diet Lampwick. You know, this whole movie is filled with bargain bin Pinocchio character knockoffs. The clowns are jerks. Silly jerks with some mildly amusing slapstick scenes, but still jerks. And then we have the other elephants, who, while not credited as such, are probably the movie's nastiest villains. They spend the entire movie not only making fun of Dumbo's ears, and in fact give him that mean nickname in the first place, but outright shun the poor baby elephant after the whole incident that got his mother locked up. The poor kid just got separated from his only real family, and this is how you treat him? These chicks are horrible, especially that gossipy one. She can just die. And fun fact, both Mrs. Jumbo and the leader of the elephant group, Matriarch, are voiced by Verna Felton, who would go on to voice quite a few other notable characters in Disney movies, including the fairy godmother, the Queen of Hearts, and Flora from Sleeping Beauty. She even goes full circle by voicing another elephant in The Jungle Book, which was her final role before her death. Matriarch may not be the most likable character, but you can't deny she had one hell of a voice. Oh yeah, and Mrs. Jumbo too, for her one line where she gives a name.
Jumbo Jr.
Brilliant! Also, Sterling Holloway makes his Disney debut in this movie as Mr. Stork. For those of you who don't know, he too would become a regular for Disney, providing multiple narrations and also voicing characters like the Cheshire Cat, Kaa from The Jungle Book, and of course, Winnie the Pooh. If you are familiar enough with any of those characters, then that should automatically tell you what he sounds like, and where you'll find him in media. Unless it's after his death in 1992, in which case it's Jim Cummings. And finally, let's talk about the Crows. Hoo boy. It's interesting how these are usually the characters that spring to mind when thinking of racist Disney characters, even taking Song of the South into account. The truth is, I don't really find them racist so much as I find them inappropriate, at least by today's standards. To me, racism comes from an intent of actual hatred, not from people who simply don't know any better. It's important to point out because we're living in a time where the line of what's racist and what's not is getting blurred, and it's causing all sorts of tension between people. But I don't want to delve too far into that since politics are not something I am an expert in, nor are they something I like talking about. But otherwise, really think for a moment. Which characters do you remember from this movie besides the titular protagonist? I can't speak for anyone else, but when thinking of all the Disney characters over the years, I sure don't think of Timothy or the Ringmaster, and hell, I tend to forget the other elephants besides Dumbo and his mom even exist. Which is probably for the best. But the Crows? Totally. Sure, it's mostly due to their controversy, but I never saw them as black stereotypes as a kid. Just these cool, crazy, entertaining birds. Sure, they can definitely be seen as stereotypes, but you can tell that these stereotypes were out of fascination and not hatred of the black community back then. It also helps that they cast actual African Americans to voice them. Except for their leader, who's voiced by the same guy who voiced Jiminy Cricket, and whose name is Jim Crow. Okay, so it's not perfect. Now let's move on before this video gets pulled for not being advertiser friendly. The songs are iconic enough, if not nearly as iconic as the ones in Snow White or Pinocchio. Look Out for Mr. Stork is an interesting one because despite them using the old as dirt explanation to kids of where babies come from, there is a bit of an undertone to it all. Aside from how threatening the song makes Mr. Stork out to be, because this is totally a character you should be afraid of,
where are we? Oh, here, Highway 61, 4 miles to the gas station, turn left.
Don't let the Winnie the Pooh voice fool you. There's also just this vibe to it that it is really being sung to some guy who, well, didn't use protection and is trying to avoid parenting duties. Seriously, really listen to the lyrics and tell me you don't get that impression. It's actually quite hilarious when you think about it. Oh yeah, the song's well composed as well. Then we have other classics like Casey Jr., a good, energetic number that I'll gladly sing to myself when riding an old train. People look at me funny. Song of the Roustabouts, ugh, not again. Putting aside what may come off as racist on the surface, I don't think the situation presented is portrayed as okay, and all the stuff about being happy comes off as either sarcasm or simply hiding how they really feel. Really read the lyrics, and you may find a clever undertone within. Please don't take down my video. Actually, scratch that, it's gonna get taken down anyway for using Disney footage. But I'll fight the claim and win as usual. Baby Mine is pretty tear-jerking, but I'm gonna save my tears for later Disney movies. I mean, the next one has a cute little deer in it. How bad can that one be?
Oh, we're gonna hit the big boss for a raise.
Yes, we're gonna hit the big boss for a raise. Oh, we're gonna get more money.
Cause we know that we're funny. We're gonna hit the big boss for a raise.
I guess that counted as a song. And then... this song is my jam! Seriously, it's all about this song. This alone is worth watching the movie for. Although if you want to save time, you can just watch the video somewhere online. But regardless, it's the catchiest Disney song I've covered so far, with the only visuals in the movie that stand up to the likes of its predecessors. This is clearly where much of the minimal budget went. I know it scared a lot of kids over the years, and it did unnerve me a little when I was young, but now, this scene is a blast for me. I freaking love it.
What an unusual view.
Oh yeah, and the setup to this number is Dumbo and Timothy unknowingly drinking alcohol. First it was Pinocchio smoking, and now we get a baby elephant getting drunk. Lovely. Though I do enjoy the bubble scene almost as much as the musical number that follows. And last but certainly not least, When I See an Elephant Fly. Say what you will about the crows, but this song is another highlight of the movie, with some clever wordplay that helps build up the movie's big payoff where Dumbo flies. Actually, really looking at these songs, they may be some of the best written ones out of the Disney movies I've covered so far. I guess that's something to respect this movie for. But yeah, I will admit, in this retrospective of animated movies, this is Disney's weakest one so far. But to be fair, just look at what came before it. I mean, the last one was Fantasia. That's gonna be a tough act to follow for almost all animated films. And you know, this movie clearly wasn't trying to be any of those other ones. Disney pretty much just made it to make back the money they lost with Fantasia. The whole point of the movie was to be simple, right down to being quite short by movie standards at approximately an hour. If it was made today, it would be released straight to TV or DVD. But even so, that's not to say they didn't put effort into it. There are still some heartfelt moments, and a couple of legitimately entertaining scenes. In the end, if you're a fan of Disney, it's still worth a watch. I'm giving Dumbo a 7 out of 10. This is Mash It and Smash It, signing off. Casey Jr.'s coming down the track with a smoky stack. Hear him puffin' coming round the hill. Casey's here to thrill every Jack and Jill. Every time his funny little whistle sounds, toot toot, everybody hurries to the circus grounds. Time for lemonade and cracker jacks. Casey Jr.'s back, Casey Jr.'s back. Oh, I'm such a dork.